Hey Teddy, do you like my hat? What do you think of my hat? Yeah, I like it too. It covers up my sweaty workout hair. Every time you show them your ass. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and I make videos about health and fitness and all of those things, endurance sports. So if you're one of those types of people who is not at all surprised when 50% or more of your utility costs are generated just through washing your workout clothes, your water bottles, your bikes, several bikes, you should hit those buttons down below because I'm going to encourage more of that type of behavior. God, endurance sport is expensive, but it will save you in healthcare costs down the line, so you should keep doing it. Spend that money and hit the buttons. Thanks for coming. But today's video, we are talking about Zwift Academy workout number 4, threshold under overs. And as you move into workout number 4, you will also be moving into the second workout block, block number 2. And you will find that in this block, we will be working some slightly different energy systems. We will be moving away from those very high intensity VO2 max level efforts and moving more into sustained threshold level efforts. That may be a relief to many of you that have had some difficult times with some of those high intensity workouts. And it may actually be more difficult for some of you, depending on how developed your aerobic engine is and how adept you are at some of these sustained efforts. Wherever you are in terms of your fitness, these types of workouts are meant to help enhance those power systems wherever you're at. So take it, embrace it. We're going to have a good time with these. But I am going to take a little bit of umbrage with the name threshold under overs for this workout, because under overs or over unders, as we talked about in workout number 1, it usually is meant to classify a certain subset of workouts that focus on a particular energy system and focusing on that lactate clearance or lactate buffering. I talked about that in workout number 1. I also touched on that lactate tolerance and clearance idea in workout number 3. So we use those workouts to work above our threshold, usually in our VO2 max zone, and then clear that lactate at the lower end of our threshold zone. So we get used to hearing over-unders and we think that that's the intended benefit of the workout. That's not really what's happening here. It's called under-overs because of the structure of the graph, but we are really working on a different type of energy system. I'm not trying to gatekeep what we call workouts. It is what it is, but just so that you're not confused, whether you're experienced hearing those types of things and you look at the name of the workout and you expect one thing and you're getting another, or as you're learning through these videos and then you're saying, well, wait, I thought you told me that over-unders did this. Just understand that this is just kind of a cute little name for the workout based on the way that the graph looks. The other question that you might have is, well, what's the difference between an under-over and an over-under? And physiologically, whether we're doing it in terms of lactate clearance or a workout like this, absolutely nothing. There actually is no benefit to doing one or the other. It really comes down to kind of habit and history. Over-unders were spearheaded as they were. Over-unders kind of roll off the tongue a little bit easier than under-overs, but really they work the same physiological systems. Even if you were to look at the under-overs and say, hey, listen, I'm ending my 4 or 5 by whatever with the over interval, and then I go into a recovery, well, that means I'm not working on clearing that lactate after that last over, so it's not as beneficial. Well, the reality is you're taking the advantage at the back end, but at the front end of that interval, you're going into your first over at a disadvantage, right? You spend that first minute, 2 minutes on the under interval, already building up some lactate instead of going into it fresh. So again, there's a negligible difference between the two. Physiologically, they are complete wash. It's just going to be a matter of what you see most commonly. Probably 90% or more of the workouts you'll see are listed as over-unders. If you like one better than the other and you want to build your own workouts because you can mentally wrap your head around one over the other, do it. You get the same exact benefit. So I just wanted to kind of clear that in advance so that we can kind of get into talking about the intended benefit of the workout. So if it's not looking at lactate clearance, what is this workout looking at? It's looking at a few things. First, it's just working your lactate threshold. The more work you do around your threshold routinely and repeatedly helps you to push that FTP up, right? Pushing up your lactate threshold. This is a benefit, and this is what we want to try to do, is one of those knobs we turn as a cyclist. We want to look at a higher execution of power. We want to train ourselves to tolerate lactate at a higher level of power. But it's also training you to work at your current FTP or lactate threshold for longer periods of time. You know, we use this colloquialism of 1 hour power power when we are talking about FTP. And it leads people a little bit astray because they think if they test at a certain FTP, even if you go to a lab and get your lactate threshold tested and set that as your FTP, it does not mean you get to turn around and execute that power for an hour. There are a lot of other knobs that you need to look at developing here. Just because your body can physiologically tolerate and produce lactate and clear it at a certain rate does not mean those other parts of your physiology are adept at handling that right now. There are a number of things to consider. One, can you mentally be uncomfortable for an hour? Many people, the answer is no. Two, muscular endurance, right? There are other things that break down far before lactate builds up beyond your capacity to clear it. If you haven't worked up your muscular endurance to hold power for that period of time, you're going to break down far sooner. You can go out for a very easy walk. Eventually, you're going to get tired. FTP is kind of the same thing. Just because lactate is not your limiter does not mean you can hold that for 1 hour. Then there's, of course, just general fitness, general endurance, all of those things. So that's why we do these types of workouts. We train these supporting systems that can help to give us a higher execution at that lactate threshold, push that lactate threshold up, enhance our VO2 max. All of these things work together to feed in. It's not just one metric. So if you're one of those folks that gets really fixated on just FTP as a one-dimensional number, disabuse yourself of that, because there are a lot of things that feed into that, and this workout will certainly help you to establish and enhance on that capacity. The next thing that this particular workout is intended to do is you'll notice that it's just not structured as 2 12-minute intervals at your FTP. Those types of intervals would certainly be a benefit, right? They're going to perform the same function here. But why did we structure these workouts as under-overs? Well, there's a few reasons for that as well. One, we're looking at something that's a little bit more practical. If you go out and do a time trial, or you go do a hill climb effort at your threshold, you're going to find that you're not just holding a static level of power, right? You're kind of going to be bouncing along the rails of that zone 4 threshold zone, right? You might be a little bit over here, you might be a little bit under here, you might have to adjust your cadence, right? This type of workout is intended to practice in a more practical way, kind of practice those adjustments. You're going to see some deliverables or some recommendations in the instructions with respect to cadence. I'll talk about that here in a few moments, but it's intended to help you to kind of practice what you might do on the real road and help you to get more comfortable with maybe jumping a little bit above and then dipping a little bit below, right? It's just kind of practical application. Physiologically, the benefit is very similar, but you're getting more of maybe a practiced and technique-based benefit by doing it this way. Another element is mentality. Going to workout number 1, you'll find that that workout works your lactate clearance and buffering capacity substantially, but 50% of that workout is really mental. It's being able to suffer. It's being able to go through those peaks and then those valleys. In the first 20 seconds of the valley, you really want to just stop. But you realize if you can just push through that brief period of time, that you actually settle and you say, okay, I can actually keep going. Of course, no sooner does that happen, you get punched in the face again. But you have to work that mentality. This workout certainly does that. And on the flip side of that, it can certainly give you a mental benefit as well in terms of getting those little mini dopamine hits. I mean, let's face it, sitting for 12 minutes and just holding FTP kind of sucks. And it makes it hurt worse. Right? What else are you looking at? You're going to look at the ass of your avatar. You're going to look at the clock counting down for seemingly forever. You're going to look at the yellow numbers on the screen. Just those sustained efforts are a little bit tough to do on the trainer when you have nothing else that you're focusing on. Breaking that down into little micro efforts, 1 minute over, 1 minute under, it's going to kind of help you to get those small wins within the workout. You're going to get that challenge of going to 102% of your FTP, where you're going to get to the end of that 1 minute and you're really going to be reaching for those seconds because you are working a little bit over threshold. You're not at your VO2 max yet, but you're just pushing those boundaries a little bit, and you're going to then get that relief of being able to dip down to that 95%. Again, some of this is a matter of a little bit of mental trickery, but it's whatever you need to do to get through the workout and to generate the benefits. That's what we come back to this time and time again to do. So it's a pretty good workout. It will give you a lot of bang for your buck in terms of working sustained efforts and enhancing your capacity to work at your lactate threshold. And it will probably feel like it's easier than the first 3 workouts until it doesn't feel easier than the first 3 workouts. You're really going to reach for the last couple of minutes of each of these intervals, especially as you get towards the end. Because spending that kind of time, you're going to have 24 total minutes in your threshold zone. It's going to be tough. So let's talk about the structure of the workout real quick. It's very straightforward. Most of these workouts are very straightforward. You're going to get the same identical first 10-minute warm-up, progressive from 50% of your FTP, peaking at 80% of your FTP. You'll get that 1 minute ramp from 80 to 95% of your FTP. You should be plenty warmed after that. You'll get a 3-minute valley. That's going to be at 55% of your FTP. And then the main sets of the workout are 2 by 12 minutes, and those are structured as 6 by 1 minute under at 95% of your FTP, and then 1 minute over at 102% of your FTP. So you're just going to go under over 6 times. When you hit that last over, you're going to get a 6-minute recovery valley at 55% of your FTP. You're going to repeat that 12-minute under over, and then you're going to get a 5-minute cool down. This one's going to start a little bit higher in intensity. This one's going to start at 65% of your FTP and ramp you down to about 45% of your FTP. So you might find that a little bit tougher, right? The difference between 65% of your FTP and 55% of your FTP in the typical workouts. It might make a difference as you're fatigued. And then I would extend that cool down as long as you can, just kind of spin out the legs. It won't be as substantial in terms of that tension in your legs that you felt in the first 3 workouts, but it always helps to extend that cool down, round out the hour. An extra 13 minutes isn't going to hurt. So let's talk about some tips to succeed in this workout, and specifically this workout and probably the rest of the workouts in this block. Tip number 1, the most important thing in terms of success here, is actually going to be making sure your FTP is set correctly. I know I talked about this before, but it is so abundantly critical in these workouts that if you do not get this set within a reasonable distance of your FTP, you will absolutely fail. There's not a ton of margin for error. You can kind of fake your way through an artificially inflated FTP in the first 3 workouts, because sometimes you can just brute force your way through those VO2 max level efforts at a higher level, although you will struggle. But as little as 5% of an inflated FTP for this workout all of a sudden takes you from being in your zone of threshold, your zone 4, and it pushes you up into your VO2 max. You're not holding your VO2 max for 12 minutes. Even the most adept VO2 max athletes, the people who are the attackers, the people who absolutely love running this high level of power, over 105%, 110%, 115%, they are not doing that for 12 minutes. That's not how the body works. That's not how VO2 max works. So I highly recommend making sure you get a touch point and a really good grasp on your FTP. Ask yourself some very honest questions about the first 3 workouts. If you've had to cut all those intervals short, if you've had to put that bias down to 90%, if you're struggling through those, I would take a look and reevaluate your FTP. Can you get a touch point with another ramp test somewhere? Are you using an FTP value from several months ago when you were at a peak and you've kind of declined in your training here, and by ego, you do not want to let go of that number? I'm telling you, you're setting yourself for real failure here. Going to be completely honest with you. I'm not trying to be mean. Please don't think that I'm just trying to be rude here. I just don't want you to fail at these workouts. There's an intended benefit, and working above your FTP at VO2 max it's not getting you a benefit. It's just burning you out and causing you to fail the workout. I'd recommend just reevaluating your FTP, looking at it. If you think it's right, go for it. If you are not quite sure and you've been struggling through workouts 1 through 3, maybe you bring that down a little bit or you retest. Another good indication that your FTP is set too high in this workout, you'll know right in the first minute or 2. This is where using your heart rate as a secondary metric can be very, very beneficial. If you see that immediately in the first 2 minutes that your heart rate is spiking to your threshold zone, your threshold level heart rate, or your LTHR. If you want to check out my video on heart rate, I will link that down below. It goes through establishing your zones if you haven't seen that already. If you are jumping in the first minute or 2 up into that zone, you're working above your FTP. The trajectory of your heart rate should be pretty straightforward. In that first minute where you're working at 95%, which is really your sweet spot, tickling on the lower end of your threshold, your heart rate should spike up quickly, but it should be going into more of your zone 3. It should not be going into your threshold zone. And then as you go into your over interval, it will probably tick up a couple of beats. And as you move through the workout, you'll find that heart rate is just going to kind of steadily increase. And towards the end of the 12 minutes, that's when your heart rate should be approaching or at your lactate threshold. It's going to depend on your fitness. You might hit that a little bit earlier if you're not as adept at doing these types of intervals or you're newer to these sustained efforts, but you should not be in your lactate threshold heart rate right off the gun. If you are, you have nowhere to go. So I would take a look at that. Now, I know that heart rate can be artificially inflated by some things, so you have to use that tertiary metric, which is your RPE, right? If you're not struggling at all, but your heart rate's up there, maybe you just had too much caffeine today. So obviously you have to do a bit of a sense check, but I'm just giving you some kind of guideposts to look at to see whether or not this is going to be a sustainable workout for you. If you're seeing that right off the gun, you might want to take that bias and set it down 3, 4, 5%, depending on how far off that you feel. The second thing to look at here is they're going to be talking about cadence in this workout. And there's parts of it that I really would recommend heeding, and there's parts of it that I would say maybe some of you ignore. For some of the over intervals, they're going to recommend being at 100 RPM. If 100 RPM is not a cadence that you're comfortable with yet, now is not the time to introduce that, because if it's going to affect the way that you get through the intervals, if you're spiking your heart rate by trying to mash those legs at 100 RPM and get through and concentrate on too many things at once, and it's going to break you into a million different pieces, don't do that, right? You should be working on cadence offline in a different workout or in endurance rides, but if it's just too much for you to do that 100 RPM here, that's okay. There's no reason to force yourself to do that. But what I do want you to try to look at, and they say this in the workout as well, is when you're going between the unders and the overs, if you can try to make the difference in that power via cadence and not via torque, you're probably going to be a little bit better off. And what I mean by that is let's say that your FTP is 200 watts for just even numbers, right? And they're going to take you from 190 watts to about 205 watts. Right, so you're going to do about a 15 watt jump there. If you can make up those 15 watts just by lifting that leg speed 3 to 5 RPM, you're actually not going to feel too much difference in your muscles in terms of tension, right? Because watts or power are made up by force times velocity, torque times leg speed. So if you can make up those extra watts in leg speed, you don't feel as much torque in your legs. So if you can make those subtle jumps up and down by just adjusting your leg speed up and down, you may find that the workout is a little bit more sustainable. Whatever that range is for you. Is it 85 to 90? Is it 90 to 95? I wouldn't go super low, but if your comfortable cadence is 75 right now, that's fine too. Try lifting it from 75 to 80 or 82, whatever it might be, and try to make those adjustments so that you can kind of have that muscle sparing effect in terms of your large working muscles by utilizing that leg speed. 3, I'm not going to belabor the point. We'll talk about nutrition. Sugar. This is a high aerobic workout. This is not a fat burning type of workout. This is not a workout that you're going to benefit from fasted. You get zero, I mean zero, overall training benefit or performance benefit by fasting for any of these workouts. So come into it properly fueled. Try to get some quick burning sugar beforehand or right at the very beginning of the workout. And the reason I talk about gels and blocks is not because I think that these are healthy. You know, I'd much rather eat real food, but when it comes to these short, punchy workouts like this, you can't digest the food fast enough to extract the sugars you need. So you need that quick gastric emptying, whether it comes from your beverage, it comes from a gel, a block. That's why I recommend this type of nutrition. For longer nutrition, if you can swing it to have something like bananas or real food, more power to you. It's much healthier for you. But that's why I talk about gels and kind of ride or race nutrition for these workouts, because you'll get that sugar benefit faster. If you're going to try to take something like real food at the beginning, the energy you're drawing to execute these workouts is going to be taken away from your digestion, and you're not going to absorb that sugar, and you could get some gastrointestinal distress as well because you just have this food kind of rotting in there somewhere. So that's my recommendation for nutrition. Nothing new here, right? In terms of erg mode, this is going to be very straightforward. I think that most trainers will handle this particular workout pretty handily. 1 minute under, 1 minute over, good transitions. If you're used to working with erg mode, you're not going to have any real difficulties here. And the last thing is just try to come into this workout a little bit fresh. I talk about timing these workouts with other rest days or endurance days in between, but especially a sustained effort like this, if you're coming in a little bit heavier, fatigued, you may struggle. You might want to push this one off an extra day. You'll find in these workouts that I'm giving a lot of variations on a theme. I have similar tips for some of these workouts. I'll usually introduce a couple of new things, but I hope that you're kind of watching this a series of workouts and these videos and learning a little bit more as you go. I'm getting a lot of great feedback and great questions from a lot of you, so I appreciate that, and I hope that you guys are finding these videos and my feedback in the comments helpful. In that regard, if you have any additional comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to leave them down below. I'll do my best to engage with all of you guys down there. Hit that thumbs up button if you got any value out of this video. It really does help the video and the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.